If you have any interest in or questions about the experience of being a trans person, then you absolutely could not go wrong by reading The Bride Was a Boy, a super adorable autobiographical trans romance diary manga. The main character and author of this manga is Chi. Assigned male at birth but identifying as female from a very young age, she tells the story of her entire life growing up as a boy, as someone who is considered a boy even if she never considered herself to be one, all the way up through her eventual marriage to a man as a woman post-transition. That is, transition including surgery, including having her gender legally changed to female, and being able to get married, all of which is important details in this story because it is set in Japan, a place where gay marriage is not legal and in which the process of having your gender changed legally is one where you have to jump through a lot of hoops and basically go through this long process, all of which is detailed within this manga. But while this manga does deal with a lot of the hardships that face trans people growing up, and it's clear that the author has had to deal with a lot of problems in her life, the overall narrative is mostly very upbeat, chipper, happy, and about the experience of finding the love of her life, being able to get married at long last after, having the sort of childhood dream of being able to get married and have kids, and never really thinking it was going to be possible until much later in life, and finally achieving that dream and experiencing the happiness of getting to do that. And that is really what makes me so happy that this book exists. The entire structure of this book is actually really fascinating because it's kind of broken up into 3 different categories of storytelling. You have the more traditional comics, then the 4-coma sections, and then parts where it's basically just giving you lots of either scientific or cultural knowledge about trans people and about the LGBT plus community. The manga originally started as just the 4-panel comics being posted online, and most of those are more about taking a single topic of what is the experience for Chi as a trans person and sort of doing a bunch of comics about that topic. So for instance, there's one section called Romantic Challenges I Faced as a Boy, and it's about, when she was living as a man, when she was being identified as such, all of the problems that she faced in, just dealing with other people, even being in relationships with men who treated her as a man, even though she saw herself as a woman, but, being as they are gay men, they're not really attracted to women, but were in relationships with her anyways. So just interesting little scenarios like that, giving you food for thought on all of it. None of it is, super in-depth. None of it is very dramatic. It's all presented with this light and fluffy kind of vibe so that, it's not like a heavy-hitting manga, but it will probably speak to a lot of relatable experiences for a lot of trans people. And the fact that Chi is very much a social person, somebody who's had lots of encounters with other people throughout her life, somebody who did actually date quite a few people. It gives a lot of perspective on all the different interactions that a transitioning person would have over the course of their life. And it's also really interesting how the marriage is used as a sort of framing device throughout the whole story. I mean, the very first thing we are introduced to is how these two characters met, how they sort of made it down the path towards getting married. So it's kind of like in the present tense of the story, the characters are already married, and it's like we're looking back through the past, and not in a way where we're going linearly from start to finish, although it is organized in a way where, one of the early chapters is about the experience of growing up as a so-called boy, and then, later on we'll get stuff about college and stuff like that, but the whole thing is more organized by topic than specifically by the history, and so we're kind of bouncing all over the timeline of Chi's experience, which I think makes it just way more engaging and interesting to read. It kind of feels like we know exactly what things are like for her now, so the question is always, how did we get to this point? In many ways, what Chi lives is what I would consider like sort of the platonic ideal of a trans experience, because everybody's experience is different, and she makes sure to address this. It's clear that she's done tons of research, talked to lots of other people, but the experience of, you know, being in like the 3rd grade, realizing that people were going to assign boy characteristics to her and then not identifying with those, sort of growing up with this experience of slowly learning more about it, coming to terms with it, having these experiences of trying to be male, trying to put the gender dysphoria out of mind, and then eventually, you know, learning enough about it and committing to the idea of living as a woman, eventually, finding a partner who did not know that she was trans and completely accepted it when he found out, and then her going through the full transition eventually, you know, not having immediately come to the conclusion that that was something she was going to do, but eventually deciding on it, getting all the surgeries. It's like she had so much of the trans experience that it allows her to speak on a lot of different topics, and, you know, to also present it in a way that makes a lot of sense to people. The fact that she was sure that she didn't identify as a man from such a young age is something that I think, communicates the message even more strongly. Like, I'm not trying to downplay the trans experience of people who realize later or anything like that. I just think that, you know, telling this kind of story just allows to cover the most different topics, and it's, again, sort of the platonic ideal of what we think of as a trans person's life story. But while being able to be applicable to so many other experiences and making sure to account for those, to speak on the subject of how it can be different for other people. And I also think it's really important that the book is sort of so light and happy. I mean, Chi doesn't really experience that many hardships that I think a lot of other trans people would. She's very lucky that her parents are completely accepting of it pretty much as soon as they find out, to an extent where it seems like they're not even really surprised. The fact that the person who she's in love with, completely accepts it, is not even bothered by the fact that she, hasn't even undergone any surgery or anything. She's just living as a woman, and he completely accepts that because he just likes her that much. Those kinds of positive things are sort of aspirational on a social level, I think, but like the fact that that is possible is so gratifying. It's so nice to know that, like, even if you might not have that same experience, even if your parents would not accept you this way, that it would be very difficult to be lucky enough to find a partner who would accept you. The fact that it has happened to somebody, that our society is even moving in a direction where something like this is possible, is important to know, I think. It's a beacon of hope. It makes you feel like, even if there's still a lot of trouble, even if there's a lot of misunderstandings, even if you have to really explain yourself over and over again to everybody, the information is getting across, people are beginning to understand and to accept it. And moreover, Chi really does her homework, she does her research. There's, again, lots of different calling to other perspectives. There's a whole link to like a bunch of studies and resources in the back of the book, citations. She explains a lot of the laws as they exist in Japan at the time of the writing in 2016. The translator notes also expand on some of it, explain some of the differences between Japan and America in these regards. And, there's obviously battles still to be fought. Gay marriage is still not legal in Japan, I don't think, which is definitely a huge problem. And when you see the amount of hoops that people have to jump through just to have their gender identity recognized by the state, it can be somewhat infuriating. And it's obvious that Chi, who has the patience of a saint, or at least portrays herself that way in the comic, is somebody who was willing to go through all those processes and to chronicle the experience and be able to just say, like, hey, here's exactly what it's like. I even think it's important that she is so social, because like there's parts in here where she's going through all the different kinds of questions she's asked by the people around her. And, for me personally, as somebody who grew up not talking to people at all, not generally getting asked questions like the ones that she gets asked, it's harder for me to relate somewhat to like what certain people have gone through who communicate with lots of people, who are asked lots of questions, because I don't get asked questions by people. Nobody cares about me or what's going on with me. I am not ever asked about if I have a girlfriend or anything like that. These are not the kind of situations I find myself in, but I appreciate why it would be so annoying to somebody if they did, try to have a social life and constantly had to, field the social paradigms of, the trans experience. I have to suspect as well that she just passes a lot more easily than a lot of trans people do. She portrays herself as very cute. She has lots of relationships over the course of her life. The man she ends up with did not even suspect that she had originally been had been assigned as a male. So, I don't think everybody's experience will necessarily involve as much social interaction as her does by being able to pass as a woman. All in all, this book is very interesting, very informative. Chi and her husband are eminently likable. This is a great life story, a great diary. I like the format of it. I love the artwork, and I'm just all around happy to see such a, I won't say comprehensive analysis of like the trans experience, since again it is so different for all different people who go through it, but that someone, tells their whole life story, goes into so much detail about each step of the process, about all the different classifications, about some of the science, and gives notations of where you can go from there. Overall, like if you're somebody who, maybe doesn't know much about the trans experience and wants to learn, or if you, have suspicions that you yourself might be trans, I would definitely implore you to read this book. It will probably be a huge help to you. It seems as though part of Chi's motivation for writing this was that it had taken her so long to sort of recognize the idea that she was trans, to like actually have words to put to the emotions, to actually, understand the community. She didn't really learn a lot of things until sort of post high school, and it would have helped a lot to have known a lot of it earlier, helped her deal with a lot of hardship. So if you're in that boat, you should definitely check this out, because it will almost certainly help you through. Even I wish I could have had something like this when I was at that age. So yeah, give it a go, and I highly recommend it. If you want to buy it physically, I would encourage you to use my Amazon Associates link in the description, because I get a kickback from whatever you buy after you click that link. On the next episode of Manga Mondays, I'm going to be covering the loner college student's sci-fi classic, cult classic, Memories of Eminon. I'm excited to do this one because I remember reading the original short ages ago. So check that out as well, and if you love my work, consider supporting me on Patreon. Even donating $1, you get access to like 100 hours of bonus content. I release bonus content to the higher tiers pretty regularly. You can get a rant about whatever you want for $15. That's about it. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.